to lesson 2 in basic anatomy for dancers. So last week we learned about the bones of our body, the types of bones that we have in our body. And this week we're going to be learning about the things that make those bones move. Tendons, ligaments, joints, the things that, if we didn't have them, we'd be like Frankenstein. So, you can follow along if you'd like. I put the slideshow in the Google Classroom assignment, but I'm also going to have it here so you guys can read here, but you don't have to watch the video again if you don't want to. So the very first thing we're going to talk about is movement. So movement involves the use of leverage. A lever is a rigid bar that moves a fixed point when effort or force is applied to it. The effort is used to make a resistance or load. To move a resistance or load, In your body, the fixed points are your joints, and the levers are your bones. And the effort is provided by muscle contractions. If you notice on the picture that you see on screen, we have that fixed point is E, and then we have the two bones, they join at E, and then the muscle in between helps move one up and down. Movement. Let's consider, for example, the jazz layout position we see in this picture. Focus on the gesture leg. That's the leg that's going out. The fixed point is the hip joint. The lever is the femur or the thigh bone. And the effort is provided by the contraction of the hip flexors. These relationships are enabled by the fact that your muscles are attached to your bones by tendons, and your bones are attached to each other by strong ligaments. So tendons. Tendons are fibrous cords, the little tiny fibers that are all together to create a dense connective tissue. They are flexible but strong, and they transmit forces when a muscle contracts. Certain tendons are surrounded by a sheath or a covering, which keeps the tendon in place and allows it to glide easily. Ligaments are also strong cords of fibrous connective tissue, but they're a little different because they connect bone to bone and hold the joints together. They're made up of strong collagen fibers, and they help keep your joints stable, but sometimes, as dancers or even just walking around, we might get an injury. So a tendon sheath can become inflamed from overuse or overtraining, and this condition is referred to as tendinitis. So sometimes we might be doing a lot of squats or a lot of running or things that have to do with our knees. If we're baseball players or basketball players, we often find ourselves kind of squatting down. And even as dancers, we find ourselves going up and down and jumping, and we might injure the tendons in our knees. That often happens. They become inflamed from overuse. So we're going to talk about ways to heal those injuries. Ligaments can be sprained. A severe stretch of a ligament can cause a tear. Most sprains and tears happen when a performer is descending from a jump and twisting the ankle or knee. That's happened to me a few times. I remember I was playing volleyball once and I stepped into a hole and my ankle went shroop. Or I've done a jeté in ballet and I landed all sorts of wrong and my leg went this way and the other part of my leg went the other way, and it was not fun, guys. Not fun. So anyway, sometimes when we have these injuries, we want to heal, right? Because we want to get back to the task at hand. We want to get back to dancing. So these injuries might require rest and healing time along with physical therapy to regain strength. It depends on how bad your injury is. Sometimes you just need to wrap it up, put some ice on it, and lift it. It's called rest, ice, constriction, and elevation. So those are the 4 steps in order to kind of help heal your injury. You can reduce risk for various tendon injuries by maintaining a healthy balance of strength training, stretching, and proper nutrition. I know a bunch of you guys really don't like stretching at all, but it's kind of important as dancers. It's kind of important as life. As you get older, you're going to lose a little bit of your flexibility, and you might find one day that you try and reach for something and ow! I'm sure some of you have seen your parents do that. I do it all the time. There's a video that you guys can watch in the slideshow as well, but we're going to move on. Joints. So joints exist where 2 bones meet, and they work smoothly thanks to cartilage, which are soft material located on the ends of bones. There are 4 main types of joints, although there are more we're going to talk about at least these four. A pivot, a hinge joint, a plane or gliding joint, and a ball and socket joint. All movements occurring at the joints have specific names and most come in pairs, which typically describe movements made in the same plane but in opposite directions. For example, flexion at the knee involves bending of the knee, whereas extension at the knee involves straightening the knee. There's another video here about joints that you can watch in the slideshow as well. Ball and socket joints include the hips and the shoulders. In these joints, one end of the bone is rounded and the end of its meeting bone is cup-shaped. In terms of the hip joint, this information is important for improving turnout and développé. I'm sure that Missy Glory has talked to you guys about turnout and the best way to improve it and your développé. Plane or gliding joints. Gliding joints allow for very little movement. For example, the point where the rib meets the spinal vertebrae is a gliding joint. The fact that these joints allow very little movement helps us understand the lack of good flexibility through the mid-spine. Some people have been able to train themselves to be able to do back bends, and they can kind of turn themselves into pretzels, but generally speaking, our backbones don't have a lot of flexibility because of the type of joints that we have there. A hinge joint. In a hinge joint, a bone with a slightly concave end meets a bone with a convex end. One example is the knee. When the knee flexes and extends, it allows movement primarily in one plane, so either front or back. However, it also allows slight rotational movement. Joint injuries. So not only do we have the inflammation in our tendons and sometimes in our ligaments with sprains, we can also have joints, very specific joint injuries. Years of dance and joint overuse can cause the cartilage, that nice soft tissue at the end of our bones, to break down, causing chronic inflammation. As cartilage breaks down in a joint, the body compensates and overuses other joints, thus creating imbalance in how you work. Sometimes your parents or your grandparents might talk about how you can hear a crack in their knee or their hip. That is from cartilage damage in their joint. Now, one thing that's really important that I want to make sure that I always bring up with you guys is nutrition for dancers. There's ways that with the food that we eat, we can help keep ourselves healthy from the inside, as well as through stretching and strengthening our body from the outside. So how can you keep your joints and connective tissue healthy with nutrition? Some of those foods include berries, so like cherries, blueberries, blackberries, citrus fruits, so oranges, grapefruits, tomatoes, pineapple, red peppers. These all have anti-inflammatory properties that can help you with your joints. Oatmeal as well can help you. Dark leafy greens like kale, broccoli, collard greens. I know you guys don't like to eat your vegetables, but there's ways that you can learn how to cook them to make them tasty and useful, and they're really good in terms of like vitamin C and, again, anti-inflammatory properties. And spices, so cinnamon, ginger, turmeric. Those are all spices that also have anti-inflammatory properties. So if you eat them, let's say you have an avena with canela. Look, two things at once. You have cinnamon and you have your oatmeal, and you're being nutritious and helping your body as a dancer. Eating an anti-inflammatory diet will help your joints. Of course, no single food is a cure-all for supporting joint health. Exercising, eating a well-balanced diet, and generally taking care of yourself are all keys in keeping your joints moving freely. I know you guys love to eat your flaming hot Cheetos and whatnot, but we shouldn't make that breakfast. We shouldn't make it lunch. We shouldn't make it dinner. Those are every now and again snacks, okay? What I'd love to see you guys be able to do is add more fruits and vegetables to your young lives, because if you start now, when you reach old age like me, you won't be in so much pain. All right? So I put in a few assignments into the Google Classroom, and I hope you guys have a good weekend.